Both divers were now trapped inside the cave. The exit route was blocked by debris. Visibility was so poor that they couldn't even see their own hands. And now they had only a few minutes of oxygen left. One of them decided to go back to look for an alternate route, while the other stayed near the debris. 5 minutes later, when he returned, what he saw was beyond belief. Cave diving is completely different from normal scuba diving. In regular scuba diving, people usually swim in open water. If something goes wrong, the diver can quickly ascend to the surface. But cave diving is surrounded by rock walls and narrow tunnels. If your oxygen runs out, your equipment fails, or you lose your sense of direction, it's game over. Cave diving is one of the few sports with an extraordinarily high casualty rate. In swimming, for every 100,000 participants, about 1.77 deaths occur. In base jumping, it's around 43. But in cave diving, for every 100,000 divers, there are 138 deaths. Each year, 25 to 30 divers lose their lives in this extreme sport. And the only reason the number isn't higher is because very few people actually attempt it. In Florida, there's a place called Sherlock Springs. It's like a maze. Some tunnels are dead ends, and some lead directly toward death. The cave's depth ranges from 80 to 120 feet. The water temperature remains around 22 degrees Celsius, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility is usually crystal clear. On the morning of November 17th, 1991, the weather was calm and pleasant. Sunlight shimmered gently on the water's surface. A group of professional cave divers from the WKPP, Woodville Karst Plain Project, set out on a mission. Their goal? To explore new passages in the cave and map them. Among them were two relatively new divers, Bill and Parker. They were best friends and both obsessed with adventure. For them, this wasn't just a dive. It was a chance to push their limits and make history. But they had no idea that this would turn into the toughest test of their lives. When people hear the name Sherlock Springs, they imagine a small pond, because from the surface it looks like a round pool about 56 meters across and only 9 meters deep. But the real story lies beneath. A vast limestone cave system stretches down to about 91 meters, with tunnels, chambers, and pathways that feel like another world. This cave is part of the Wakula Cave System, one of the largest underwater cave networks on Earth. The entrance leads into a narrow path called the Scars Restriction Zone, so tight that only one diver can pass through at a time, and even then their tanks and shoulders scrape against the rock walls. But once you pass that zone, a breathtaking scene opens up, like a massive underwater highway. It's both beautiful and deadly. That day, the WKPP team divided into 4 groups, each with a specific role. 1, the surface team, stayed near the entrance, monitoring time and safety. 2, the decompression team, hung spare oxygen tanks at specific depths for the return journey. 3, the safety and line team, secured guide ropes and ensured a clear route. 4, the explorers, Bill and Parker, tasked with pushing deeper into the unexplored cave. Around 10 a.m., all teams entered the water. Bill and Parker checked their scooters and tanks, said a short prayer, and descended into the depths. At about 20 meters, they met George, a member of the decompression team. Then they continued toward the Scars Restriction Zone, adjusting their buoyancy as they moved forward. Soon they reached a massive chamber called Wakula, so stunning it felt like floating through the sky underwater. Within 40 minutes, they reached a section called Grand Canyon 4 and descended as planned. The tunnels were narrow, but their scooters worked perfectly. After about 25 minutes of effort, they arrived at the lower Wakula room, where they found the route that led upward again. Everything so far had gone according to plan. They felt free, even inside that tight cave. But when their oxygen levels dropped, they decided to turn back. They had no idea their freedom would end right there. As they reached back toward the Grand Canyon passage, everything had changed. The water was filled with silt. Visibility had dropped to zero. They couldn't even see their own hands. The path ahead was no longer the same as when they'd entered minutes earlier. Something was very wrong. Holding on to the guideline, they tried to move forward, believing the restriction zone was close. But soon they realized the exit was blocked. A pile of sediment and rock had collapsed, sealing off the passage, and their guide rope was buried under it. Their oxygen was nearly depleted. Panic began to set in. Bill wrote on his slate to Parker, "Stay here. I'll check the line." He swam back to confirm they hadn't taken a wrong turn. But the markers showed this was the exit route. He quickly returned, but when he got back, just 5 minutes later, Parker was gone. Bill was terrified. He shined his torch all around, but there was no sign of Parker in the cloud of mud. Then he noticed a faint stream of water flowing from the debris. Maybe Parker had gone that way, trying to dig through. But there was no time to think. His oxygen was almost out. Bill started digging with his bare hands. Every second felt like death creeping closer. The blocked section was only 2 meters long, but for Bill, it felt like miles. Finally, he managed to squeeze through. The tunnel curved upward. He saw a regulator hanging from the guideline, probably Parker's, but ignored it. He just needed air. Holding his breath, he pushed on. Finally, at about 30 meters depth, he reached the decompression station and took a long breath from an oxygen tank. He thought he was safe, but then he noticed something. Parker's oxygen tank was still hanging there, untouched, which meant Parker never made it this far. If Parker wasn't at the debris site or the station, where was he? Bill's heart sank. He realized his best friend might be gone. Soon, George, the decompression diver, arrived. Bill wrote on his slate, "Parker is dead." George tried to bring Bill up, but Bill refused to leave without Parker. George went up, brought more divers, and together they forced Bill to surface. Everyone outside was in shock. Divers went back in, but there was no trace of Parker, only his regulator and tank lying separately. The next morning, Parker's body was found near the upper section of the cave. He had removed all his gear and was wearing only his wetsuit. But why did he take off his gear? Investigators believe Parker thought that by removing it, his body's buoyancy would help him float upward to safety. But he lost consciousness just a few meters away from the decompression tank and died right there. Years later, scientists investigated the real cause of the accident. They discovered that when the divers paused at 20 meters for decompression, their air bubbles collected under the cave's ceiling. Over time, those bubbles weakened the rock structure above. When George exited the cave, the ceiling collapsed behind him, causing a landslide that blocked the exit. The investigation also revealed that when Parker found the exit blocked, he immediately started digging with his hands, hoping to clear the passage for Bill. He likely ran out of oxygen while doing it, and never got the chance to tell Bill that he had already made a way out. If Parker hadn't dug that passage, Bill would have died there too. Parker sacrificed his life so his friend could live. We hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video. Thank you for your constant love and support.